In this video, I'm going to talk about the if function, which is used incredibly often in Excel. It's a powerful tool and it's not that hard to use. Like all functions, you want to ask, what does it need to do its job? And in this case, it needs three things. And what does it return? And what's incredible about the if functions, it can return a lot of different things. It can return text, it can return a number, it can return a range, and we'll demonstrate all of those in this video. So I have the tool tip that comes up when you type equal if. Basically, the logical test is any test that can return a true or false value. I see the word false is not here. I fixed it. Then, based on this test, if it returns true, what action do you want to take if it returns true? Now, of course, it says here value, but there's several ways to get to that value. You could insert a sum function. You could just type a number. You could type a piece of text in quotes. You can do some big gnarly math formula in here. So something you're going to do that it's going to return a value if true, and then, of course, the same thing if your test were to return false. So let's demonstrate in a simple case. I have some data, some products, and they have a quantity. And all I want in this cell is a yes or no if the quantity is greater than 0. I'm just asking, is the product available? And it's available as long as the quantity is greater than 0. I'll zoom in so we can see a little better as I type the formula. Double click to make this bigger. And so I'm going to type equal if. Print the C. And now here's my tooltip. What's the test? The test is that greater than 0? So I simply click on that cell and put, is it greater than 0? Now, what other options do I have? I can obviously say, is it less than 0? You can say less than or equal to 0. You can also say not equal. That's what not equal looks like. So not equal 0. So those are the things that you can put in here. I'm just going to say greater than 0. That's my test. Comma. So notice this is bold. That tells you where you're at. The minute you type a comma, you move on to the next piece of your function, which is, well, what are we going to do if that's true? And in this case, we just want to type the word yes or no. Anytime you type text in a function, you have to put it in quotes. And anytime you type numbers in a function, you don't put them in quotes. Okay, so now that's the value of true. If I were to put a comma after this, comma, notice this is bold, value of false. What are you going to do if it's not greater than 0? Well, then the answer is no, it's not available. And that's how you put your test. And that's it. So then you hit enter. And there's your yes because it's available. If I double click, you'll get no on this one. Yes, yes, no, yes, and then no down here. So that's putting text into a cell. As long as I'm going to change up our scenario a little bit because this reminds me of something. Let me change this column heading to simply a delivery fee. You realize I got a typo there. Okay, and the rule is, if the price is over $1,000, the delivery will be 0, but if it's under, we're going to charge $10, something like that. So simple if again. Now, what was my test? If the price is greater than 1,000, we're not going to charge them for delivery. So I just take a look at this price cell and put greater than. And in this case, I'm hard coding these numbers. Normally, I would encourage you to have a little lookup table down here that says what the price limit is and what the delivery fee is. But here's what I want to demonstrate. If the price is over 1,000, comma, what am I going to do if that's true? The delivery fee is 0. So you type a 0, and otherwise, I think I said it was $10. You type a 10. Okay, notice those values are not in quotes. I get students all the time putting numbers in quotes, and then they become a piece of text, and later, if you're trying to add up the delivery fee, it doesn't work because a 0 or 10 in quotes will not add to a number. So when you're dealing with numbers in a formula, don't put them in quotes. And along the same lines, I'll have students who will look at my solution picture and they'll see like a $10 sign, right? That $10. And so then they will put this number in quotes and add a $ to it. So now you really have a piece of text. Remember, these $ aren't here because somebody typed them. They're here because we formatted it with either accounting or a currency format. In this case, it happens to be accounting. So if you put this in and drag it down far enough, you'll get the $10, but that's now a piece of text. And normally, sometimes this does work. Oh, it does grab it this time. Wow, Excel is getting a little bit smarter. Typically, and you might run into issues where you can't do the math on that because it is text. In this case, it seems to be working, but I've run into a lot of instances where I'm trying to do math with these things that students have put quotes around, and it doesn't work. So just be careful. As a general rule of thumb, never put quotes around numbers, and you always put quotes around words like text. So yeses and nos and things like that. So let's go to another example where we're going to use the if function to do some calculations in the value if true and value if false part. Let me zoom in a little bit to make it bigger. So basically we just have somebody's salary or hourly rate, how many hours they worked, and then we just want to calculate their pay. And in a traditional business, if a person works more than 40 hours in a week, they get 1.5 times their pay for hours over 40. Okay, so for this first person, how many hours do they get 1.5 times their $16 an hour rate? Only 5. For 5 hours, they get 1.5, so half of this is 8, so they get $24 an hour for 5 hours, and then they get $16 an hour for the other 40. If you take a look at all of these people, they didn't work over 45 or over 40 hours, right? So they just get their rate times the hours. So let's put this in an if function. Equal if. I need a test because I have 2 calculations. One is if they've worked overtime as one calculation, and if they didn't work overtime, it's a separate calculation. And I happen to have 2 places to put those calculations in this if statement. So my test is simply looking at, well, how many hours did they work? If that is greater than 40, then again, maybe 40 would be something you'd put down here in a lookup table. In this case, I'm just going to hard code that value. Okay, there's my test. That's either going to return true or false. In this first example, it's going to return true. As I drag the formula down, it's going to be false, 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 false until we get to here, and then it's back to true again. So then, comma, what is the value if it's true? So now inside this value of true, as I've mentioned, you can do a million things inside of here. It doesn't just have to be one word. You can do a mathematical calculation. So what we're going to do is first, we have to figure out how many hours over 40 did they work. So I'm going to take this and subtract it from 40. All right, so they worked 5 hours. That's what that would calculate to, right? And then what am I going to multiply that by? Remember, if they work over 40, they get 1.5 times their rate. Okay, so I have 5 hours times the 24 that this would equate to. 1.5 times 16 is going to return 24. So then I'm not done. That's just their overtime pay. That was the 5 hours over 40. So then I have to add in, plus, the 40 hours they worked. And I know they worked 40 because the test said that they worked over 40. So 40 hours times their regular rate. And so that's what that looks like. You don't need parentheses here. It would have worked just fine without them, but sometimes I put them in just to make it clear what's going on. Here's where I determine how many hours over 40. Here's 1.5 times their rate, and this is their first 40 hours. Cool. So that is the value if true. And notice if I select on that, it selects your entire formula. If I select on this, it goes to my logical test. Right here, I'm going to put in a comma. And now notice this is bold. Well, if it's not over 40, what is the math? Oh, well, that's a little easier. That's just the rate times the hours. That's it. And now we put a parenthesis there. I don't know why it popped up. And we're done. There's your formula. And you see how when you type your formulas, you can look at these tooltips to see where you're at. And then you hit enter. And now I can drag that down and get everybody's pay. One more example. So we had an if statement returning a piece of text when we had yeses and nos in here. We have one where we're doing calculations. And just in anticipation of my video where we talk about nested functions, where one function sits inside of another, I want to demonstrate where the if function can actually return a range of cells. So here's my scenario. I have these products again, and the price is different in market 1 versus market 2. And so right here, I'm having your user type a market. So they may type market 1, they may type market 2. Okay, and once they type that market, I want to return the range of cells that represent the prices in that market. So right here, zoom in again, we are going to do an equal if. And our test is, we're just like, what market did the user type? I need to know what market they type so I can return the appropriate range of cells. So I'm looking at this cell and saying, does this equal, quote, we're talking about text here, market 1. So that's text, so you have to put it in quotes, comma. Here's my test, is it true or false? In this case, it's false. But if it were true, what do I want to return? I want to return a range of cells, just like that, comma. If it's not market 1, we're going to assume it's market 2, and we'll return a different range of cells. And again, we'll deal with this a lot this quarter. This is what's called a spill array. The fact that you're returning a range of cells, when I hit enter, notice this light blue box. It spilled the contents. So the fact that market 2 has 1,000, 1,200, 8,000, 1,200, you'll see that right here. So just in and of itself, this isn't all that useful. You can ask, well, why am I doing that? Well, the reason you're doing that is because in my next video, when we talk about nested functions, if you've watched the XLOOKUP function, you notice you have a couple instances where I need an array of information, right? A range of information. And so, for instance, in this return array, I'm going to be able to replace this with an if statement, because an if statement can return a range of information. So we'll talk about that in more detail when we talk about nested ifs. The point here is simply an if statement. It takes 3 pieces of information, a logical test, right? A value of true, and then what am I going to do if it's false? And what it returns depends. It can return a piece of text, it can return a calculation, which ultimately leads to a value, or it can return a range. And so that is it with the if function. Not too hard to use if you follow your tooltip prompts.